Welcome, everyone. Welcome to week 5 of Faithful Conversations about the 1619 Project, which was born out of Faithful Voices for Racial Justice, a project of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. I am Connie Ryan, Executive Director and moderator for this conversation. We are very glad you have joined us to listen to some of Iowa's faith leaders. We hope you will allow it to inform and to challenge your own conversation. The goal of the New York Times, the 1619 Project, is to, quote, reframe American history by considering what it would mean to regard 1619 as our nation's birth year. And as the 1619 Project warns, quote, American history cannot be told truthfully without a clear vision of how inhuman and immoral the treatment of Black Americans has been. By acknowledging this shameful history, by trying hard to understand its powerful influence on the present, perhaps we can prepare ourselves for a more just future. The readings for week 5 include American Popular Music by Wesley Morris, Sugar by Khalil Gibran Muhammad, Pecan Pioneer by Tia Miles, and The Wealth Gap by Trymaine Lee. You can find the links to all the readings through the New York Times website or the Pulitzer Center website or at faithful-voices.org. I am very pleased to have 3 of Iowa's faith leaders to be in conversation about the issues addressed in the reading and to do so from their faith lens. Our faith leaders today are Reverend Abraham Funchess from Jubilee United Methodist Church Freedom Center in Waterloo, Reverend Sophie Matinee Vanderwell from Second Reformed Church in Pella, and Sabria Khan from the Muslim community organization Masjid An-Noor from Des Moines. Thank you all 3 for joining the conversation. I'm going to start with the first very simple question, and I'm going to begin with Reverend Funchess. What surprised you about the history in these readings?
The first thing that really spoke to me was the information about Antoine, the slave gardener. I'd never heard that name before. And by the way, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's just a joy always to work with you, Connie, just so you know. And I think this program is fabulous that you put together with your team.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend. And Reverend Matinee Vanderwell, how about you? What surprised you in the readings?
Well, I don't know if I would call this surprise, but I guess it was kind of a realization for me that we can know history in general, but it's when it's storied in people and families and names and places that it really becomes important, or at least touches us in a new way. And so the story of the Elmore Bowling family, or the story of Nat King Cole, and his his experience in the minstrel thing, and then also the story of in the sugar plantations and of the family that are trying to get their justice. I guess what struck me was history is one thing, and we know trends and the way things went, but when it becomes about real people that we know and name, then it becomes more real to us.
Yeah, I thought all of those stories and the stories told by many of the writers in the 1619 Project really brings it to reality, brings it to life. Mm-hmm. And Sabria, how about you? What surprised you?
I would agree with Reverend Funchess. I mean, I think that the Antoine story brought up a whole bunch of realizations that there are probably numerous untold stories of how things were conceived, and we have no idea. They're hidden by whitewashing. So I think that that's a really great example of that. And the fact that on within the sugar plantations, those are absolutely, I mean, I think I think one part of history that we do learn slightly of, within our schooling is, cotton plantations and things that went on. And it is never to the extreme of what happened on those sugar plantations and the extremities of what everybody had kind of experienced there.
Yeah, it does seem to dive in much deeper to what I think any of us learn in school and whatever age that we might be. And so that leads me to the next question. And Reverend Matinee Vanderwell, I'm going to toss this to you first. Is some of this history familiar to you as you read through it? How does it fit with and how does it contradict the history that you previously understood?
Yeah, so I would actually agree with Ms. Khan about the, we heard much more about cotton than we ever did about sugar. And at least in my growing up, and I have to kind of give a caveat here. I was not raised in the United States. So although we learned from American textbooks, I didn't learn American history as an American. I learned it as a child growing up, a French child growing up in Japan. So that's a bit of an odd thing, but we still used American textbooks. So it was kind of a strange story or history about something that was happening across the world for us. So, but like I said, cotton was much more what we were taught about. And again, I think what we were not taught are little things like the story of the pecans. So that very short article about how really it was somebody who gave his slave the job of developing a pecan that was comestible to everybody, was palatable to everybody, and yet that person remains unnamed. So many of these things, in a sense, we just are never told, don't know. They're maybe too far into details that we don't hear about. Also, I would dare say the music article, the article about music, that was just, I mean, other than knowing a little bit here and there about, Negro spirituals in the fields, or I just didn't get or understand the kind of the long train of history on that. So.
Yeah, and each of those kind of went to the idea of stolen history and
Yes.
stolen identities and creations. And Sabria, how about you? Was the history familiar to you, and how does it fit with what you learned over the years?
I think, I think most of it is, we hear growing up, just a slight gist of all of this, and kind of glazed over everything, nothing really getting into these details of it. When you hear all of the stories together, you begin to see the pattern and you begin to see where systemic racism really began, because you're taking away all of these, this white society taking away all of the cultures and the customs and, basically the personalities of Blacks at that time, and then them trying to kind of find themselves within that, and really persevering through that and finding their niche and finding, okay, well, this is what I'm dealt. What can I do to make it mine? What can I do to own this, of what this little bit that's given to me, that's forced upon me to close off, and this is what I have to deal with. And even then, as time goes on, we're still, pigeonholing them within their culture, and taking, as they developed something better, like the pecans or the music, they developed it into something better. Either it's, okay, no, I don't, you're stepping in my shoes, you are making this better than what I wanted it to be, and now I'm going, now you have to be downtrodden because of that. I'm going to react towards that, or white society will take it as their own. And so I think that within all of the articles, it's just that underlining theme of just that systemic racism all the way from there that has led us to where we are right now, still not able to get out of that. And so I think that even though we're taught slight pieces of this history, it's never connected this way, and it's never the whole truth. It's pieces of the truth, so that you don't see the connection right away.
Thank you, Sabria. We lost Sophie for a moment, but she appears to be back.
I heard you, but you just didn't see me. So.
All right. Hey, Reverend Funchess, what about you? Is history familiar to you and different than what you learned over the years?
No, not really. Many of the articles in these pieces are the kind of information that we play with on a regular basis, not only in the church, especially for people who are concerned about exercising and engaging a prophetic imagination to change the status quo, but also as a human rights director. We're familiar with some of this history that talked about redlining and covenants and that kind of thing. We have always talked about systemic racism, as my colleagues are talking about, and how that's impacting the status quo today, and how an understanding of history is absolutely necessary, not just Black history, because we're getting ready to take the MLK Freedom Bus Tour, and we go to Memphis, Montgomery, Birmingham, and Selma. To see these iconic human rights, civil rights spaces and places. And we have been pitching that, the air is different there. But while we're there, we hope a deeper appreciation for the cornerstones of democracy. It's not dead history. It's a history that's alive and relevant. And so when we go to these places, we hope that we can certainly understand the socio-political climate just that much better as we try to conjoin what we understand at the moment when in these places with what's happening in the real world today. And all of these articles that we've had an opportunity to look over, read, points to the fact that ain't too much has changed. It's just wrapped up in new garb to some degree. The great crime would be to not learn from, the past histories. What was new, as I indicated, I didn't know about Antoine. I never heard that before. With the pecan, I love pecans. I had no idea that there was an Antoine, has something to do with grafting, these limbs into trees in order to find the best variety. That was new to me.
And doesn't it also make you wonder then how many other Antoines got lost in history, the Antoines that created other things that were taken from them and their ideas were taken?
Absolutely.
Which kind of goes to also the whole theme, I think, one of the themes in the 1619 Project, and certainly in these articles, is around wealth. And there was one specifically about wealth and the wealth gap. But it also is named or unnamed in a lot of these articles because those creations, if given the opportunity to take them and run with them, could have created wealth. And there were many instances that we read where wealth was taken away from them, but also just the ideas and their creativity and their intellectual property, if you will, were taken from them. So I'm interested in this idea of the wealth gap and how it's impacted communities today because of all of the wealth that has been taken. And the story about the Bowling family was certainly telling, but so many examples over the years. And sorry, Reverend Funchess, I told you I'd forget to say this, but I'm going to start with you on that. Just that idea of that wealth gap and the history of that.
Right. This is something, that we try to talk about on a regular and consistent basis here locally, obviously, because we're saying, to echo what Dr. King talked about, you can't be 300, 400 years behind in a race and then all of a sudden expect that there to be some kind of equal footing. It's insane. And then, of course, as you continue to read and learn so much more through these stories that the 1619 Project informs us with, and other writings like How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi or Caste by Isabel Wickelson, you begin to appreciate, obviously, that there's always been this great wealth gap, and it's only getting wider, quite frankly. It's not getting smaller, it's getting wider. And I think the article in this particular piece talked about the median wealth income for whites, 171,000 compared to median income for blacks being at 17,000, 171,000 compared to 17,000. And then, you have a new conversation. People want to know why, the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, people of color, why can't they get ahead, so to speak? And then we have an opportunity to rehash these old conversations. Is because you never, when we talk about faith, what it brings to bear for me is Luke chapter 19. We say, what would Jesus do? What would Zacchaeus do? Zacchaeus would say, oh my goodness, I realize my fault. I repent of my old ways. I want to restore 4 times what I stole from anybody in order to make it right. So if we were asking ourselves, what would Zacchaeus do, for instance, I think, we would be looking at some form of reparation. They never got the 40 acres and a mule. It was legislated to happen. And then when Johnson got in, all that was ripped away. And so, and then when you think about the Greenwood incidents in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there was a big story about it on the news not too long ago. But when these things happen, and you take away not only the financial legacy that could be bequeathed to future generations, when that's taking away, and not only the financial legacy, but the brain wealth, when so many people are killed at one time. To see the resilience, quite frankly, of Black people, other people of color, the indigenous people, it is remarkable. And I kind of relate to the brother who wrote the article on music, the miracle of sound. Well, everything is somewhat of a miracle when you consider all things. It's just remarkable that we even here today talking in light of everything that's already transpired. But anyway.
Yeah, thank you. Sabria, I want you to think about this idea of the wealth gap and the impact on communities, but also tie it in with your faith. And as a person who is coming from the Muslim faith, how does this all kind of mesh for you?
Well, I think that that one of the key pieces in Islam is this distribution of wealth and charity and this helping of others. And when I say charity, I mean in whatever form that is, not just money, but in kindness and in equality. And so I think that all of that, I think that kind of hit me the most in that art and in the wealth gap article, because we are just allowing, as a society, allowing all of this to just keep on happening. We can take steps to do this, but instead, every step that we take towards kind of managing this, we're also not wanting to put ourselves in any kind of discomfort, and it doesn't work that way.
Thank you. And Reverend Matney Vanderwell, I would give you the same question of that idea of the wealth gap, but also where your faith
Faith.
can apply.
I guess as I reflected, my faith, at least, my background is of a faith that is storied. And again, so I think the importance of just telling stories and remembering stories, so that we don't just talk about an event, but about the people who were affected by that event, so that we actually kind of see this history embodied. And I would just agree with what both of my colleagues said here. Kind of what does then trying to make the stories of those who are unheard heard, so that we can, from this time forward, do things differently, not allow injustices to just sort of multiply. How do we distribute our resources in such a way that everyone is able to benefit, not just those who are at the top of the pyramid? I think that's what I would say.
And to kind of follow up on that, and I'm going to go back to you, Reverend Matinee Vanderwell, of this idea of what you're learning in these readings. How does it affirm, stretch, or challenge your own faith and also your faith tradition?
Well, my own faith in humanity is challenged for sure. Recognizing that my ancestors participated in all of this, and that in some ways, knowingly or unknowingly, I continue to participate in that. So to a certain extent, what is affirmed in my faith is this need for repentance, for change, for turning. And then what was your second half of your question? I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought.
Oh, no, that's fine. Learning what affirms or stretches or challenges your faith tradition.
Tradition. Well, again, I think, my faith tradition, the faith tradition that I'm in right now, arrived in this country in 1628. So not long after 1619, and was based originally out of New York City, where slavery was, part and parcel of the life, and probably of the faith communities that were there. So to a certain extent, again, that need for repentance, acknowledgement of what we were a part of, and our need for repentance and change.
Thank you. And Sabria, the same question to you. With what you are learning, what does it affirm, stretch, or challenge your own faith and your faith tradition?
I don't think that it does. I think what it does is the need for other people to reaffirm their faith. I mean, this is what faith is. It is treating people the way that they're supposed to be, as equals. I think it's a matter of everybody ignoring that and not practicing the way that they should be. I think that all of these faiths have that underlining peace and love within them. So what you choose to do with that is what you choose to do with that. And unfortunately, I mean, none of these stories are that surprising to any of us. We know this stuff. We know this is happening because it didn't happen just then. It's happening now. People are overshadowed and people are put into communities where they cannot progress, as a whole, as a majority white community, we are still doing this. And so I don't think that challenges my faith at all. It's, like was said before me, this challenges my faith in humanity. I mean, this is something that we should know as human beings, that how to treat people and how to just the basics of humanity, really, is what it is. I mean, all of these stories are things that we've heard pieces of before. Maybe we got more details now, but this is stuff that we know and we see happening today still.
Thank you, Sabria. And Reverend Funchess, the same question to you. What in what you are learning, what does it affirm, stretch, or challenge your faith and your faith tradition?
Right. What I'm learning as we engage in these kinds of conversations and these readings is that it just affirms the need to continually engage the prophetic imagination. It inspires us with a newfangled courage, hopefully, to keep knocking, keep pushing, to keep improvising, to borrow from my brother's work when he was talking about music, the idea of improvising. And he says something about music that's born of feeling, of play, of exhaustion, and of hope. All these feelings combine in order to keep pushing us, because you can get lost in the just a mere composition of the thing, but it's the background noise that gives it its distinctive flavor. And I just believe that each of us carries the Imago Dei in his or her life. And as a result of doing so, we've each been charged to do something very distinctive in terms of making a contribution in the world. But if we're going to do anything, for instance, about the racial wealth gap, if we're going to do anything about the mistreatment of different persons and of different sexual orientations and that kind of thing in the world today, we have to muster up, something that comes from deep within. And that becomes musical in some way. Hard to define, but it's improvisation that somehow takes over and allows us to be bigger than we sometimes actually seem to be. And so the cross and the lynching tree, Jesus was somewhat one of the first lynchees. And I think that we are still seeing technical lynchings all over. And therefore, it demands that we, come forward and say, in light of all of this data that we're aware of, we have to put a stop to these lynchings, and thereby we embody this work in a way that demands that we do more unto our last breath.
Thank you so much. Thank you to each of our faith leaders. I am so grateful to each of you for your presence and your thoughtful conversation tonight, and has challenged each of us to think deeper on these issues. Thank you to each of you who are watching. Your willingness to listen and engage in the conversation is truly important. How will our nation and communities make progress in dismantling racism if we cannot talk candidly and then take action? A heartfelt thank you to our team of faith leaders who designed Faithful Conversations about the 1619 Project, and those who participate in Faithful Voices for Racial Justice each week. And for now, if you have not already done so, please register to vote. And if you have registered to vote, please help someone else register to vote and to go to the polls. Be well and take care.